love the metaphor of breaking the bonds because really the process of transformation is breaking these bonds of your previous paradigm that are limiting you. And once these bonds are broken, once these bonds are broken, then the particles can move around with even more freedom. Hi, I'm Misha. Welcome to Vibrant Classroom, where I share reflections and revelations on the journey to create, speak, and be vibrantly. Today I wanted to talk about metamorphosis, or as I like to call it, nature's great hero's journey. So if you subscribe to my newsletter or follow me on Substack, you'll know that I wrote a post about this and I called it Growing Pains, what nature teaches us about metamorphosis, about what nature teaches us about transformation. And I think the name is very apt because it truly is often a painful process. And also, if you know about, if you've read Joseph Campbell, which I've only kind of watched YouTube videos about him, but you'll know that transformation in the hero's journey is not kind of just one, it doesn't start and end. It's actually kind of, I don't even know if you call it, it's cyclical, but I think when they draw the diagram, it's almost like a shell. It keeps going and going and going and deepening and deepening. So really the process of metamorphosis and transformation is that of a lifetime or many lifetimes. It never ends. In my reflections about metamorphosis, I actually started by when I watched a video about the difference between joy and happiness. And it described kind of happiness as kind of an ephemeral feeling of elation and euphoria, whereas joy is kind of a more profound state of contentment. And both of them kind of involve a certain sense of presence to be able to kind of let in the abundance of the universe, but happiness is something that you can really experience in kind of subtle ways throughout your life, even if you're not kind of really living very truly or fully, or even if you're not ultimately living in a state of joy. Whereas joy requires you to go through the underworld and go through the process of transformation. Although I doubt you would find that in the Merriam-Webster definition of joy. So this is kind of what got me thinking about the hero's journey, and I'm always inspired by nature, so I thought a lot about kind of what nature teaches us about this process, about the hero's journey. So often, probably when you think about metamorphosis, the first image that comes to mind is from nature. It's the idea of the butterfly. And really you have this idea of kind of initially a caterpillar that then goes and becomes a chrysalis and then becomes a butterfly, and they all, in each stage along the way, they look very, very different, and there's a very clear transformation that occurs. And I think it's great because along the way there's so many different things that we can learn. And I also like the idea that when the butterfly emerges from the chrysalis, it is truly a coming out, which also kind of mirrors the fabulous process of coming out in humans, which I'll probably do another video about. But along the entire process of a butterfly's life cycle, there are so many things that we can learn. So from the stage that it's a caterpillar or a larva, it actually grows to about, I think depending on the species, 100 times its initial size. So really a big expansion, even within kind of the same, in its same form. And as it does this, it sheds its exoskeleton, it sheds its skin, I think about 5 times, depending upon the species. So even within the same paradigm, so to speak, there's a big shift that occurs. And another thing that I like is, you know, a lot of the times, if you're kind of not happy with your life and you know there's something that might need to shift, maybe there's a point where you don't necessarily know where you're going, or you're not exactly sure what the next step is, or you do kind of know that you need to take a leap and go into the unknown, but you're kind of scared about what that looks like. I think a caterpillar is a great source of inspiration because, you know, they never sit and they never contemplate the pros and cons of the situation. They kind of just move to the next stage. So there's this enzyme that's secreted, and I forget the name of it. It's kind of endo something that is given off when it's time for the caterpillar to kind of shed its skin. so that it can continue to expand. But it's only released at that time. But what I love is, nature just sends the signal, and then the caterpillar sheds its skin, and then it keeps growing. And I think this is great because they're not pondering the situation. They just kind of intrinsically sense that there's this greater abundance. They can't grow anymore within the confines of their skin. They know that they need to shed it in order to keep growing. And also, there's kind of a danger because if they don't shed their skin, they're going to get trapped in, I don't know all the gory details, but essentially they will die if they don't shed their skin. And this is kind of, we talk about necessity as the mother of invention. So in caterpillars, there's a very immediate sense of necessity, and often in humans, often in our own situations in life, there's not always that same level of necessity, which, on a surface level, it's nice because, it keeps us safe, and it makes our day-to-day experience of life less kind of immediately painful. But it does allow us to continue to exist in the same paradigm we've been existing in for a long time, even if there is kind of an underlying level of discontent. Whereas often, if we were to be pushed out of the nest, so to speak, we'd find out that we can fly. So I love that this example of caterpillars, as you see the intrinsic trust in the signs of nature from that enzyme, and also in knowing that not only is there greater abundance to be had in where they're going, but there's also just a danger in the stagnation of where they are. So nature does give the double-edged sword of necessity, but it also all makes sure that the creatures of nature are always prepared for where they are. So this enzyme is only secreted at the point when the caterpillar is ready to leave its exoskeleton, and then also at the point when it's ready to kind of transform into a chrysalis. There's I think it's a juvenile hormone that it has until that stage, and again, maybe I'm getting the name wrong, but essentially it maintains its current state as a caterpillar, as a larva, and it won't undergo the transformation to become a chrysalis and then a butterfly until it loses the juvenile hormone. So nature, it can show some tough love by pushing creatures out of the nest, but it always makes sure that everyone has what they need on a fundamental level, which is kind of like in the hero's journey, where in the call to adventure, there's usually some kind of guide who gives the hero some type of equipment as they begin their journey, so that they have what they need to start. So I really do love that example, and I do also like that, there's a sense of yes, there is a sense of unknown, there is a sense of what you're leaving behind, but you do need to leave something behind in order to get something more big, expansive, and beautiful. So in this example, us looking from the outside, it's very clear the beauty of metamorphosis in butterflies. But this is actually one of the perhaps rare situations where there is kind of an external manifestation of this transformation. And especially in humans, a lot of the times, transformation metamorphosis is invisible. So and it takes time. So normally, we get a lot of pressures from our environment, maybe our friends, maybe our kind of society, maybe parents, asking kind of really focused on where you are right now, kind of these concrete external things that show kind of where you are in your process, but they don't see kind of necessarily the big internal shifts that are happening. And this is when there's another example from, I don't know if you would call it nature or science, I'm going to call it nature, about this change in states, which is the literal process of changing states. So when something is shifting from a solid to a liquid, or a liquid to a gas at either its melting point or its boiling point respectively, there's what will happen is the temperature increases and increases until either the boiling point or the melting point, and then it plateaus. And then what's happening at the plateaus, this is the boiling point or the melting point, when the matter is being shifted from one state to another. And then once the full shift has happened to the new state, then the temperature increases again. So what's happening here is, again, I'm not a scientist and I don't pretend to know all the details, but essentially the type of energy being used shifts from, oh, I really did forget this. I think there's kinetic energy, and that's the thing that relates to temperature and kind of this more external energy that's related to heat. And then the energy then shifts when it gets to the boiling point or melting point, and then it refocuses on the energy needed to break the bonds. So instead of kinetic energy about moving around the world, generating more heat, then it focused internally on kind of this state shifting from one state to another. So if you're the scientist in the lab and you're looking at the temperature, you're watching the thermometer, you'll see that the temperature is not changing at all. So if you weren't a scientist, you would see the temperature staying the same. You might think nothing's happening. There's a stagnation. It's all in the same place. It's not going anywhere. But if you are a scientist, you would know actually something very profound is happening. It's shifting from one fundamental state, one fundamental paradigm to another. And I really like this example for humans because it's the same idea as the caterpillar shedding its skin or turning into a chrysalis and then a butterfly. But they start out in a heavier state, whether a solid or a liquid, and the particles are moving around freely, generating more and more heat. But then they reach a level in which they can't kind of move around freely anymore. And in order to move around even more freely, they need to transform into an even lighter substance, and that requires them to go internally and break the bonds. And I love the metaphor of breaking the bonds because really the process of transformation is breaking these bonds of your previous paradigm that are limiting you. And once these bonds are broken, then the particles can move around with even more freedom, whether it's a liquid or a gas. So I think I love this because it really is exactly the same process that's happening in humans, and humans are made up of particles. So I think it's a beautiful metaphor, and also the fact that this is something that often happens internally, and to the onlooker, they might not see or appreciate the profound process that's happening. Another thing that I really like about all of these is how there's kind of an intrinsically spiritual element in nature that's happening that really mirrors our own hero's journey, and if we look for it, we see it everywhere. So there's kind of this deeper sense of consciousness that's embedded in all things, and if we're able to access it, we too can become lighter, freer particles and move around with even more mobility and freedom. So those are my reflections on kind of nature's hero's journey and metamorphosis, and how that can ultimately lead us to this greater sense of profound joy. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it insightful, and stay tuned for more episodes of Vibrant Classroom with more reflections on the journey to create, speak, and be vibrantly. Take good care.